and launch into it. So hello again. I am RRP's communications manager, Kristen Kovach Bentley, and also a 2018 Thoroughbred Makeover graduate myself, not me, but my horse. And we have with us the RRP consulting veterinarian, Dr. Shannon Reed, whose acronyms I always never remember, but there are many because you're very qualified. So, and also a makeover graduate yourself with multiple horses. So we are here to help you through. I'm mostly going to turn it over to Dr. Reed. If you guys have questions as we go, definitely feel free to jot them down either in the Zoom chat or on the Facebook chat. If they are super timely, I'll catch them as we go. Chances are we'll probably just circle back and hit all the questions at the end, because also chances are that we're going to answer them as we go. So feel free to drop those in there and we'll come back to you guys. So Dr. Reed, take it away.
Yeah, I think you and I talked a little bit beforehand that what we're going to go over tonight is a little bit about the arrival exam and then a little bit about just some tips and tricks for getting through the makeover with you and your horse as happy as you can be at the end. So since I've gotten to compete and watch, and then we have Kristen, who's gotten to watch from behind the lens and front of the lens as a competitor, we have some definitive things to sort of offer for thoughts. So I'm going to kick it off with just giving a little bit of a review of what it will look like for the arrival exam this year and see if we have any questions after that, and then kind of transition how we go from the arrival exam to staying happy and healthy in the time at the park. Does that work for you?
That sounds great to me.
All right, perfect. So this is what it's going to look like. Before you actually get there to the park, you have received communication from the show secretary as to where your stall is at the horse park. There will be maps included and everything like that. So if you're used to some shows where you have to check in first before you get into your stall and get set up, that is not the case at Retired Racehorse Project Makeover. And again, correct me if I say anything off script or wrong here, but you're going to get to your stall, take a deep breath, get your stuff set up so you have some time when you arrive to sort of get yourself fixed and your horse to get some food, some water, relax. You can hand walk, things like that. Once you do your official check-in, where you go to the check-in tent and you check in for the show to get your packet and things like that, they will put you into an electronic queue, meaning you and your horse will enter into a rolling list of horses that are ready for the arrival exam. So when you check in, your horse has to be on property. And as you check in with the arrival tent, you are saying, I'm ready for my horse to have the exam. So you're
also not bringing the horse with you.
Yes, exactly.
Somebody does that every year.
Yeah, exactly. So just you or your representative are walking up to check in. They're going to give you some stuff, your number, possibly a saddle pad, depending upon deliveries and things like that. And while you are up there, they will need your paperwork if you haven't already downloaded it electronically. So we try to get things like the health certificates and the Coggins put in ahead of time. So if those are not downloaded to the site beforehand, they will want those when you check in. Those papers are going to be attached to your horse's file and they'll be used as part of the arrival exam. So we've gotten to the horse park, we've gotten settled in, we're ready to check in and be examined by the vets. Our paperwork is either already in the system or we brought it to the desk to check in, and then you get in the queue. I believe that the attendees can actually check the queue on the dashboard under the Thoroughbred Makeover tab. So you may be also able to see where you are in the order. We are expecting that we will get to horses within 30 to 45 minutes of your check-in. That's what our time was last year. So that means once you check in, you should be staying by your stall with your horse, because a vet is going to arrive, and if you are not there, they're going to keep moving. They may try and call you and figure out where you are, but mostly we need you to stay by your stall with your horse, because a large portion of the arrival exams will be happening in your horse's stall. We found out it makes them much happier, much more comfortable to be examined in their stall. So here's what's going to happen in part one. We're going to open up the file on your horse, and we're going to check the health certificate and the Coggins that you have downloaded. And as part of that, we're going to be checking your horse's vaccine status. I'm not going to give the specifics of those right now in this webinar, because that is all in the rule book as to what the time is for those things, how old your health certificate can be, how old your Coggins can be, your vaccine status, when that needs to be clear and within the rules. I am just going to throw up a flag that there is a time frame for the vaccines. You can't get a vaccine the day before you come to the makeover and have that count. So please review the timelines, make sure that you have the right timeline for your vaccine and that you have the right information from your veterinarian in the right form. Again, all in the rule book and all on the Makeover Trainer portal. So that's going to be checked. Once we have that checked and it gets the A-OK, then we're going to move on to doing what's called a TPR, or temperature, pulse, and respiration on your horse. The veterinarians and veterinary students both will be listening to your horse's heart and lungs to make sure that they sound healthy. They may listen to your horse's gut sounds to make sure things are rolling along well. They will take a temperature, and if it's a little bit high and it's hot out, we'll make some adjustments to that. But if your horse has an elevated temperature, that will generate a flag that we need to do some things. So just kind of keep that in mind. Once they have their TPR done and their heart and lungs listened to, the veterinarians and the veterinary students will give your horse a body condition score. All horses showing at the makeover have to be at a body condition score of 4 or above. That is not negotiable. And some of you have worried that just a trip is going to drop the body condition score. That's not going to happen just because of a trailer ride. So maybe they'll change a little bit of water weight, but they'll probably arrive within the same body condition score as they came. So just be aware we're looking for a 4. Then after they do the body condition score, in some order, they will also check your microchip. So the microchip in the horse needs to be registered with the jockey club. And we need to have that communication from the jockey club that it matches. So we will be checking to make sure that the microchip we scan on your horse matches the one that the jockey club has on record for your horse. If you know your horse has 2 or 3 microchips, it's nice to tell us ahead of time so we can make sure we're looking for the right one. If the students can't find it or the original vet can't find it, usually one of us will be able to find it. So we've talked about, we're going to look for a microchip. We're going to check your paperwork and your vaccine status. We're going to do that TPR and listen to your horse's heart and lungs. And we're going to check the body condition score on your horse. We may also ask you, if your horse has a big old scar, we may ask you about it. And if you tell us about it, that's usually plenty. We may look and see, boy, that's a big swollen knee. Let me look at it a little bit more closely. And if we see a swollen knee, but we feel like it's cold and it has good range of motion and it's an old injury, then we're going to know that and we're going to write some notes about it. So that is going to be checked as well. Once you clear that part 1 of your exam, you still have one more part to do. And that's the soundness check. And once you're through that part 1 of the exam, they'll tell you you're ready for the soundness check. We'll be letting you know ahead of time where that's going to be. We don't have that set right now. It's usually in a separate aisleway of a set of barns. You'll take your horse to the soundness check. You may have to get in line. There may be 6 or 7 horses in line. You can let them graze. Don't get them too close to each other. Then this is what the soundness check entails. On a firm, hard surface, your horse is going to be asked to walk in a straight line and then turn a circle in each direction. If you think your horse, to be comfortable moving around on that pavement, needs boots, like hoof boots, easy riders, things like that, they should be in those. So whatever you're planning on your horse using for comfort, if it's they're actually shod, or they're in boots, those should be on during the exam for soundness. That's what we're looking for, is to make sure your horse is going to be able to move around. So no trotting at the initial soundness exam. Once you're done with that and you pass, you'll get a sticker that goes on your horse's bridle tag and will enter in the computer that you're good. So I don't know if there's any questions so far that you see.
No questions yet. I just wanted to add in, don't be shy about the hoof boots. And then also just to clarify, that is, hoof boots are permitted. It's like sports medicine boots or splint boots. Sometimes when people read boots, they just think all boots cannot be used or all boots can be used. So it's no leg boots, but if you normally use a hoof boot, definitely use it for that exam. Don't be, shy about using those. I use scoop boots on my guys now. So
yeah, if you have a big, beautiful bay horse and you think he looks best when he's in white leg wraps for dressage, we're not going to bring those to the vet exam. We're going to want to be able to look at their legs. So great point.
Yeah.
Okay. So just before we move on to some of the other parts of this show, some of you might think, well, what if I don't pass? Okay. There are multiple steps. So it's not that one veterinarian will be able to pass or fail your horse. If on the exam we have if someone says in that exam, they don't feel like the body condition score is a 4, that horse will enter into a second queue, and you will be asked to represent your horse to a different veterinarian. We'll coordinate that at the time. And then a second veterinarian will look at the horse beginning to end. They'll check the microchip again, they'll check the TPR, they'll do the body condition score, partly so that that veterinarian is kind of blinded to why the horse didn't pass and they have a fresh eye. So if it was the soundness portion, your horse didn't pass, you're still going to have the first part again. And that's so that we can have that kind of blinded factor to it. So let's say that second veterinarian still flags you. Then we involve the steward and a third veterinarian. So a horse to not pass the arrival exam and get dismissed from the show will have been checked by 3 different veterinarians during the time. So I hope that eases people, as it's not just if one veterinarian looks at it and says your horse looks a certain way, we're going to check that. The other thing I would really encourage people to do is look at what it means to body condition score a horse, because it's not all about whether you can see a rib. There's many portions that we're checking. And so that's the basics of it. So if you don't pass, then you'll have multiple checks. Another thing oh, yes, ma'am.
I'll just do a quick plug. If you have not ever done a body condition score with a vet or hands-on, it is definitely a hands-on process. Every year someone will post a picture in the trainer group and they're like, can you guys score my horse for me? I need to know if he's going to be okay to come. And we cannot do that on a photo. There's just no way. It is a hands-on process. So if you have not done that process before, I'm going to give a quick plug that we have a seminar, I believe on Thursday afternoon at the Makeover on body condition scoring. And it is a hands-on demo process. So if you want to get your hands on a horse and body condition score it with vets present to sort of help guide you through it, put that one on your calendar. Hopefully you're not riding at that time, but we're offering that this year as a little extra education service for everybody. Carry on.
That's fun. Okay. So there's a couple other things that might flag you besides body condition score or soundness. If your horse, we feel like the heart has a different rhythm that we don't love, we may follow up ourselves with some instrumentation to look at the heart a little bit closer. Or if we're super concerned, we may call over the on-call veterinarian to look at that. So that's another reason. If your horse has a fever or a high temperature, we will tell you your horse needs to stay in the stall for the next 2 hours and we'll come back and check it. And if the temperature hasn't come down, we do have some isolation stalls that are set up and we will be communicating with you about what that looks like. So if your horse has a high temperature and you've been told to keep him in the stall, for the love of all, keep him in the stall. And if you have to go to isolation, we'll work through what that looks like. So yeah, that's that. I thought that might be a nice segue into a couple of things for on-show sites, and then we'll see what you want to throw in for keeping healthy. We're doing the high temperature stuff because we want good biosecurity. So it's the Makeover. It's super fun, but try to minimize having your horse make extended nose-to-nose contact with every single horse they come across at the show. Think about it back to COVID times. Keep your 6 feet distances with your horses. If you're filling up water buckets, don't dunk the hose into the water, because then every other water bucket is being put into your water bucket. So think about washing your hands after you pet someone else's horse before you go to hers. We keep a pretty tight show as far as biosecurity goes for most shows, but think about your horse is meeting a bunch of strangers that all shipped in from different parts of the country where they were with another bunch of different horses, and think about that as part of your biosecurity, if you will, at the show.
If this sounds like, man, this show is taking this way more seriously than anything I've ever gone to, just run a Google search for EHV1 outbreaks or strangles outbreaks and just read about how many major showgrounds end up being shut down or totally quarantined for stuff like this. And it does maybe sound like overkill if you're accustomed like me, I just show locally now, you're like, oh, this is crazy. But we don't want to become one of those headlines that the Thoroughbred Makeover became the site of the latest EHV1 outbreak and everyone was stuck there while we got that taken care of. So, it is like it might sound like a lot if you're not accustomed to it, but there is a great reason for keeping everybody clean and not, breathing on each other. And I've
Yeah.
become that crazy person at the horse show who's like, don't touch my horse. Like, don't let your horse breathe on mine, please. Thank you. I don't know where you came
For
from.
sure, right? And we have, other than like big 5-star events where horses are flying in from all over the country or large races, we have horses coming from every corner of the United States and Canada. And once even a horse flying over from Europe. So we have that population to go for. Another thing I thought I would mention is there are, in addition to the veterinarians that are doing the arrival exams, there are show vets on site that are available for emergency. So those are the people. It should be Haggard. There should be phone numbers posted with the show secretary and in your competitor's booklet. So those are the people that you would call if you had a concern about colic or things like that. So we have 2 different teams of vets that are going to be on site to help you. What are some of your thoughts you had for preserving your horse through the week?
It's like preserving your horse's sanity. So in 2018, I was like, I did my overnight show. I am prepped, like I am ready to go. So I did one night overnight show. And then back in those days, you could ship in fairly early for the makeover. So we arrived at the horse park at 6:30 a.m. on Monday, and I didn't show until Thursday and Friday that week. So by like Tuesday afternoon, my horse was completely over being in those stalls. So my horses live out 24/7 at home, and I know a lot of other people keep their horses out as much as possible. And sometimes a 1-night or a 2-night show, the horse, like, as you're doing your makeover prep, the horse seems like it's doing well. At the horse park, they can't hang their heads over the stall doors. The stalls are just completely enclosed. So you can try kind of playing around with some stall guards and stuff so horses can get their heads down the aisle. And that's what I did. And then immediately my horse figured out how to bust through that and like run down the aisle. And I had to, wrestle him back into his stall with no halter, no lead rope, nothing on him. So that was fun. So yeah, I found out the hard way that my horse like really wanted to be out of the stall as much as possible. So the makeover turned into a marathon of like relay hand walking with all of my friends. So we would take a 2-hour shift and we would go hand walk or graze jobber out in the field for about 2 hours at a time, then hand them off to the next person. And then, when people got tired of that, then I would ride them around a lot. But it turned out to be a much bigger issue to keep him in a stall for a whole week. And that's not to terrify everybody who has a horse that's on 24/7 turnout at home. But I would definitely be prepared to be creative during the week, especially if you're not someone who does a lot of big week-long shows. This is a lot to ask of a horse, like with, maybe minimal prep or just a few weekends of prep. Like there's a lot going on at the makeover that can really kind of mess with their brains. So did your guys adjust to the week at the horse park well?
Well, yeah, they both did. One of them had like flown all over the country and some of his friends were there and he just thought he was, he likes the paparazzi. So he was having his best week ever. But I also had a lot of people that came with me and he got to spend a lot of time with a stall guard and his head over and people feeding him cookies and things like that. And I did, just like you said, take him out to hand graze a lot and we went through walks. So luckily for me, mine, as far as being in their stall, were pretty happy. One of them was a little more fired up about getting in the arenas and we needed to do a little bit more schooling time, but they seem to adjust to the process. But they also, I guess to say fairly, were stalled at night or during the day at home. So they're not out 24/7. That probably helped them a bit.
Yeah, you did a better job like prepping your guys for that experience than I did. I was like, yes, great, live out as much as possible. That's so good for you. And it was until we got to the makeover and then it was abruptly not okay anymore. So this is also not to launch like a second great round pen panic of 2023, because that always happens back in January when everyone realizes the round pens are booked up. You can get by without a round pen. If you have access to a round pen and you would like to share, and do shifts in those round pens, those are great. I know there's always 2 camps with round pens. One camp is like, oh my God, you need one. And the other camp is like, no, they're really far away from the barns. They're really inconvenient. I think it's like worth walking a few extra 100 yards to be able to turn your horse out in a round pen if you have access to one, just so that they can get that mental like, outside of the stall. Yeah, it's not like a 10-acre turnout, but it's still a place where they can get down and roll and then, fart and run around a little bit and they're fine. So if you can get into a round pen, like it's not a bad idea to maybe have one lined up or have some friends that have one who might be able to, donate or sell you some time in that. I had a very nice friend who I shipped in with who's like, oh my gosh, just use my round pen, you're fine. So that was very generous. Thank you, Sarah. And then, yeah, the rest of the time it was a lot of hand grazing and riding. And I ended up riding more than I planned to. And I know that there's a fine line to walk there between maybe riding more than you intended and then overriding and making your horse sore and tired. So chances are at the end of, 5 or 6 days in Kentucky, standing, even if you're bedding well, standing on a concrete stall floor, like your horse is probably going to be a little sore by the end of it. And that's not to excuse like, oh, my horse is lame, but it's okay because I've been here for 6 days. It's just, he might be body sore, just from being there and being in a stall and being in a different scenario. So you'll want to, it's hard for me to sit here and just go, just be a horseman, but it is a lot of what you essentially have to do at the makeover is you feel out how much riding your horse needs. Maybe he wants lunging, maybe he wants some hand walking. You don't have to get on and lope circles for 45 minutes, but maybe go out for a hack. The nice thing at the park is that the whole park is open, so you can really ride anywhere. Because I'm accustomed to riding fields at home, I would just saddle up and go out for like an hour and a half long walk around the park. And that's different from going into a ring and loping in circles for that hour and a half. But that was the mental refresher that horse needed to get out and just do something different and be out of the stall. So there is that sort of that balance act though, Dr. Reed.
Yeah.
If you're on your horse 10 hours a day, that's going to be too many hours.
I think I was going to balance your discussion with, I love that you brought up the horsemanship because we also have had, so another thing we haven't talked about is if you make it to the finale, on Friday before the finale, your horse is going to have an actual soundness jog. And if your horse doesn't jog sound, it doesn't matter if they're not jogging sound because they're just body sore or their feet just hurt. They're not going to be able to go on because your horse is in pain. So it doesn't necessarily matter if we say, well, of course he's in pain and body sore. He's been ridden for 5 days. Well, then don't do that is the thought. So I like the idea of having horsemanship to it. And some things I would add to it is don't walk on the asphalt on your horse's back a lot if you don't have to. Get over to the horse pass as quick as you can. If you are on your horse hours and hours out of the day, make sure that you have a reason for it. So if you're going to go on every trail ride and every hack and your horse isn't used to that, like you were just saying your horses are out 24/7 and they're working in the fields. That's different than having a horse that is stalled and then spend some time with his friends and then suddenly we're out under saddle for 10 hours. So my other tips are bring saddle pads to clean out so that you have nice, clean saddle pads every day. We've seen some saddle sores that have developed by the end of the week. Some of them were from ill-fitting saddles. That's a thing. And some of them were because they were in dirty saddle pads. Specifically, I'm not to pick on the Western folks, but if you have a thick saddle pad that you can't clean, think about what you want to have under it. So some thoughts are you want to have your horse exercising and moving, but you want to also realize that your horse is not the couch to sit on for the whole time. And then also, like you said, what's their normal level of exercise? So we see hoof soreness when people walking around on the pavement too much. Check their feet, pack their feet. If you know how to do that, you can pack their feet to help. And be aware that since you are on the asphalt stalls with bedding over the top of it, that you should bed them generously for that. And if you're already freaking out about the cost of the shavings, you should know that there's a Tractor Supply within 20 minutes of the horse park that you can go get, 20 bags of shavings and get that full for them. So do think about their feet and their back, and then as much hand walking and stuff as you can do for them. So yeah, I love the fact that we're talking about a balance of horsemanship. If your horse washes out on Friday from soundness and it says, well, he was just body sore, and then we see every single picture that someone took, your horse was out with you riding them, it might be putting them that together.
Yeah, like it's hard for us to sit here, and make like a hard and fast rule for you guys, right? Like, oh, make sure you do this and don't do that. Like it's going to vary by, individual horse. It's going to vary by individual rider, like if you are, like there are some days when I at home am on my horses for 2-3 hours at a time doing the ranch work, but it's different footing than what I'd be doing, riding around the horse park on hard pavement.
Yeah.
So that is a good note that we will reiterate in the next webinar that we're doing right before the makeover. There are horse paths to get to everywhere you almost everywhere you need to go at the horse park. So you have very little reason to ever be riding around on the asphalt. So if you find yourself riding on a road somewhere, stop and look around, because there's probably a horse path running parallel to you to take you to where you need to go. There's a lot of hills at the horse park too. So if you have a shod horse in particular on those paved roads, that gets real sketchy real fast. So keep an eye out for the horse park, the horse paths, because the footing is really good on those. In general, the footing at the horse park, I think, is great. My horse went from, riding on like hard packed droughty fields and was like, this is amazing, like loping around at the horse park, because the footing was like a cloud. So you don't really have to worry about like bad ground anywhere. So yeah, that is the nice thing. You just have to really manage the amount of time you're out there and then getting to and from all that good footing back to your stall again. I'll also make a little plug for the Night Watch service.
Have that written down. Yes.
Yeah. Elaine at Night Watch. Initially, I was like, I don't think I need that. Like, I'll be okay. I'll just drive back and forth a lot. And then when I moved in, I was the only person in my shed row, because again, you can move in quite early in the old days at the makeover. And I was the only horse for like 400 yards in every direction. And I was like, oh, I need the Night Watch. And that was the best, like $15 a night or whatever it was that I spent. So they will not, get your horse out and hand graze it for you, but they are making the rounds all night long. If there's a problem, they will call you and let you know. They can feed, like throw hay in, they can throw grain in. If you leave it out, they'll check water. It is a really good service. So that is worth the investment. If you don't have that in your budget, like consider putting that in your budget just for the peace of mind.
Yeah, I loved it because I put the breakfast out the night before in front of the stall. She changed it. By the time I got there, I didn't have to run over in my pajamas because I was staying at the campground to feed the horses, then come back. It was a nice set. So I love that you brought up the Night Watch, because I was also going to bring up water. So make sure you bring at least 2 buckets for water, and you could consider before you leave having one of those buckets have something like a water flavor in it, like Horse Quenchers or Gallagher's formula, so that you have something that when you get there is familiar to them. So you want to make sure, especially if it's hot, because sometimes the makeover can go one of 2 ways. It's either really hot or freezing, that you need to have at least 2 buckets for water. Horses, if you have a horse that's prone to ulcers, maybe you should think about Gastrogard or using one of the supplements like Outlast. And the thing that helps horses the most to not get ulcers at horse shows is to keep feed in front of them. So if you're a little overwhelmed by the cost of hay or bringing hay, again, we got that Tractor Supply and they have compressed Timothy, compressed alfalfa. You can buy it there, but try to keep some sort of forage in front of your horse as much as possible. And a great way to do that is to have Elaine throw them a flake of hay at midnight or something like that. So forage, and water is going to be the biggest things that helps your horse keep ahead.
And one other thing that I always forget to mention, because I didn't take advantage of this because just nobody talked about it in 2018, there's a ton of layover facilities in the Lexington area because people ship in and out of there all the time. And I know that there's people like swapping links around in the trainers group. So definitely take a look in there and feel free to post your own in search of. And I think more people have been taking advantage of this in recent years, and it's been going really, really well for people. It is a little bit inconvenient, if you don't want to be driving back and forth a lot, but sometimes it's worth a little bit of hassle and inconvenience just so that your horse can get out and stretch and roll and graze a little, and do their thing. So, we keep a pretty busy social calendar at the makeover. So there's always stuff to do, so that's something you have to balance out yourself. If you want to, ship out after you're done showing for the day and then maybe come back to do some of the social stuff, so your horse can get out and about, and that's something that, again, you have to figure out what works well for your budget. I know some people show the whole week off their trailer and they don't get the stall at the makeover and they just use their ship-in facility as their home base. So that's another way you can do it. I think by now probably everyone has made their stall reservations, so that may not be an option, but it's just something to keep in mind. If you need to, you take the horse off property and let them go roll and stretch and walk around somewhere with grass and then bring them back in.
Yeah. And if it's going to be hot, you might consider getting a appropriate fan. And that means it's a 3-prong fan on the electric cord. You can't have the basic box fans that only have 2 prongs to the cord, but you can have the fans with 3 prongs on the cord. A lot of people throw them in a hay net, like the actual fan, and sling it over the door. And so they're or over the wall, if you will, and your horse gets a little bit of airflow. So I think another hint I have is, or tip I have, is check the weather the day before you go to leave and try to pack appropriately and realize it may be really hot and then really cold. So if you have to body clip your horse because it's hot and then it turns to 40 degrees overnight, maybe you have to throw a light blanket in there. So I think checking the weather the day before you leave is the best thing because it can change so frequently.
Yeah, Kentucky's, I mean, we say this about Kentucky is kind of true anywhere in October. It's going to go from hot to cold to hot to cold. So.
Where it's not Texas. Texas is not going to do that.
Oh, well, that's good.
It's going to be hot.
Consistency, great.
Very consistent. I'm riding in a tank top in February half the time.
That's a nice change.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's like most of the main points I was thinking of is just getting people in mind of like keeping them healthy throughout the whole week, realizing that there's going to be vets on site the whole time, and that maybe even in the classes, the judges are going to be watching for soundness, and they may be looking for horses to make sure that they're moving right, and that when we come to that Friday, it doesn't matter why they're not sound or comfortable. They're just going to not be able to go through to the finale. So you're kind of keeping that in mind. Lots of resources. We talked about the horses, and I'm sure there's something along the way too, but don't forget about yourselves. Like, yeah, there is a cafeteria or like a little cafe on site. Sometimes it's hit or miss whether it's great. So think about getting a cooler. Think about how much water you're going to need. Think about, I don't know how you were when you were there, but I was like all day long engaged where I was like, what happened to the day? I've been here for 14 hours and I've just not stopped. So think about how you're going to take care of yourself. Make sure you bring a camp chair. So maybe you can hang out outside your horse's stall while they're hanging their head over the stall guard and you're both taking a nap. Don't forget about that part of things too.
That's why you buy the extra shavings bales, because I ended up making a bed for my tack stall buddy who had been up all night braiding, and she was like hallucinating by 8 a.m. And I was like, here's a nap for you, and built her a little bed out of extra shavings bales. So there's always that option as well. Yeah, it is true. Like we don't ever talk about taking care of the rider. And that always tends to be my afterthought as well. So, but yeah, you mentioned that and that got me thinking. There's always practitioners around who are doing like PEMF, which I did not do in 2018 because I had never had it done to my horse prior. So that's something to keep in mind. Like it might sound cool to try all these new therapies and things that you have access to if you don't always have access to them at home. But if you don't know how your horse may react to them, maybe don't try that like the night before you show, because we don't have a whole lot of PEMF practitioners in this part of the state. So hello, anyone in Western New York who would like to get a MagnaWave, I will sign right up for you now that I know how it works. But I was not going to do that the night before I showed my horse at the makeover because I just was like, well, this is not the time to try something brand new. And also to your point about hoof packing, some horses do not react well to a hoof pack for the first time. So like, I love the theory of magic cushion, and my horses do not like it. And I keep trying it every now and then to be like, maybe it'll work. And every time they're like, I hate this, get it out. So yeah, try not to like throw a bunch of new stuff at your horse if you are not sure how they're going to react, but definitely do your best to take care of your horse. So again, I realize that sounds like really conflicting advice, but there's no hard and fast, like, here's how to do the makeover guide that we can give you. It's just being a good horseman and making decisions in your horse's best interests the whole week. We do have a couple of comments. Okay, Wendy, who's our ranch steward and also a makeover graduate, she mentioned bring some extra buckets in case they're not happy in a stall and break one. I feel like Wendy might be speaking from experience there. Fortunately, it was the bucket that broke and not horse, so good call. And Wendy also asked, can horses school in the rings prior to their entrance exam?
Schooling is allowed before the exam in the previous year, and I think will be in this year as well. They definitely cannot show without the sticker that says they're available to show, but they can school before they have had their exam. I would discourage it because it gets you moving on a little bit better track. And so I don't want people necessarily waiting to get in line for the arrival exam so that they can school. And here's the reason why. In between Monday afternoon, when we open for arrival exams, and Tuesday at 5 p.m., we have to have all 400 horses examined. So it helps us out a lot if people get in the queue and in an efficient manner. And the other thing is, it's probably not best practices to be wandering around the park with your horse and schooling until you know what its temp is and what it's like. So yes, there is the official policy is that they can school before they've had their arrival exam. They cannot show or enter into an official class without the exam. And if you are coming after Tuesday, you need to set up ahead of time your appointment for your arrival exam, because the general arrival exams are only available through Tuesday.
Yeah, good question, Wendy. Thank you for asking that, because I think that does come up.
Yeah, it sure does.
So in general, like the vet team, they're not trying to catch anybody out. Like you're not the big bad scary Dr. Reed who wants to throw horses out of the makeover.
No.
So the whole reason, so I mean, it was really like your, sort of experiences that helped shape the arrival exam that we have today. So if you just want to give us just a little bit of background as to why we have the arrival exam.
Yeah, I would love to. And then maybe give you guys also why we think it's the happiest show on earth for multiple reasons. So the arrival exam came about because, one, we had early in the process of the makeover, a lot of people were saying, well, the horses are skinny because you can't put weight on thoroughbreds. And we know that's not actually true, but you do need to treat them and feed them in a certain way for their metabolism. And so we talked about that we had several horses each year that were a little bit on the thin side, and some of them maybe shockingly so. And it was just, well, we can't feed them enough. So we talked about how do we give people the the desire to get them up. And that was to introduce a modest body condition score that reflects an athletic horse with a 4, and then to start doing a bunch of training ahead of time and webinars and seminars about how to get there. So that was one reason why. And then as a veterinarian who gets to work in a lot of university practices where I see a lot of things, I thought, well, we could make this the horse show that sets the standard for having healthy biosecurity practices, making sure that we have horses that should be around each other, that they, and then we had some horses that were progressing through, and maybe they were pretty sore by the time they got to the end, and then they were still going on to the finale. So we introduced the arrival exam and the jogs as a way to really motivate people to push their horsemanship. And since we started the arrival exams, we've had some really beautifully conditioned horses. They were always there, and we did see some every year, but the overall makeup of the horses that were coming has just really elevated. And I don't want a body condition score of 9 to show up. That's the other side of things, but it just made it became like a point of pride for everybody to get their horse to a 4 or 5, nice and shiny and ready to go. And then really thinking about what they were going to do to maintain their soundness. So that's kind of how it started. We had a conversation about how do we elevate the game and make this the horse show that everybody should be kind of striving to get to as far as health of their horse. And then we also introduced another factor is, I'm sure everybody knows that there is a shortage of equine veterinarians in the world. That is happening. And the makeover is one of the places that is a coveted experience for veterinary students to come. I just released the list for what veterinary students are invited this year to come, and they were ecstatic and things like that. So each year we invite somewhere between 20 to 30 veterinary students to come be a part of the team. They love talking with the trainers from RRP because the trainers from RRP want to talk about their horses. They want to tell them how they fed them to get there. They want to hear their heartbeats. They want to listen to things. So it's just really this really good team effort of we're trying to help you so that your horse does the best it can. And we're trying to educate an entire next generation of equine veterinarians that they can do this, and that horse owners are a good ally in this. And so that is another part of the arrival exam that we've expanded, is using it for an educational experience for future veterinarians. So we started it to elevate the game as far as how the horses would come and stay. And then it's grown into this experience for training future veterinarians as well. And I think for the most part, people are giving us hugs after they've passed their body condition score. And you're like, your horse is a 6, we're fine. So I just love the feeling that we've gotten that people are thinking about, how do I set my horse up for success?
Yeah, it's a great opportunity to break a lot of the thoroughbred stereotypes, right? That like they're not sound, they're too thin, you can't have this, you can't have that. So, and as we all know at this point, like we've all made it to August of this makeover year. Prepping for the makeover is so much more than just getting the training in. It's really helping this horse physically, mentally, emotionally adjust to a second career and life after racing, which is a very different physical, mental, emotional ask than sport horse life. So yeah, it's a good thing that we're doing. It's a good thing that you all are doing. It's a great thing that the vets are doing. And it's just a good way to sort of move that art of bringing a thoroughbred along to the next level. So.
Yeah. And in case you do find yourself getting crabby, realize that none of the veterinarians are being paid to be there.
Yes, it is all volunteers. We did have some more questions coming in. So Holly, can you rent stall mats from Deaver if I remember correctly? I believe you are correct, Holly. You can rent stall mats. I know some people are like, yes, the stall mats are great. Other people are like, the stall mats are too thin. They didn't do anything. So, rent at your own discretion. I know some people bring their own mats. Some people have used those like puzzle mats that you put in children's playrooms and then they just throw them out at the end. If that is worth it to you, there's many ways to mat a stall. I know another popular combination, a lot of people use those like soak down pellets and then put dry shavings on top. So that was the most elaborate answer to your question, Holly, which is yes, you can rent stall mats. So you're welcome. Another question from Justine, is the arrival exam jog on concrete or asphalt? She is curious as a barefoot horse owner. So the first note is that arrival exam walk. So that may also.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So the arrival exam is just a walk. I can actually see a lot at a walk after 20 years of experience with this, but we're asking you to walk and it is on the asphalt that is around the stalls. So if you have a barefoot horse and you do not perceive they are comfortable, you might be like, well, then why do I have to go on asphalt? Because your horse is going to be on asphalt moving around a lot. So if you think your horse needs the boots for the arrival exam on its feet, scoot boots, something like that, then maybe they also have them on in the stall or when they're moving about. So the arrival exam is at the walk on the asphalt. It's a quiet walk. The actual jogs will be on similar footing to what the horses are showing in. So we're not going to be using the jog strip this year for various reasons. The footing's going to be closer to what they are showing in, and that will be at a jog, but that's just for the finale horses.
And you're welcome, Justine. Just said thank you. Lisa, what about purchasing tickets or attending competitor party? Yes, that is a little bit outside of the scope of this webinar, but more information about the competitor party and ticketing will be released at the end of this month. So stay tuned for more about that.
And you should.
Yes. Yeah, go to the party. The party's a good time. All right, I will leave this open for a few more minutes. If there's any other questions related to arrival exam procedures, keeping your horse happy at the makeover, keeping yourself happy at the makeover, or the finale jogs. Shannon, what is your beverage of choice if trainers wish to cheer you?
Currently, if we're talking about beverages of choice that will make me happy while I'm on site, they mean non-alcoholic. So that would be a cherry Coke Zero or a diet Dr. Pepper. Otherwise, I'm a hard cider kind of girl, but any of those things will make me happy. Yeah, exactly.
That sounds great.
But honestly, just shining faces that are happy to be there is it's a totally different experience than when your whole job is to be a surgeon saying, I'm sorry, we've got to go to colic surgery. So I don't get the same amount of happiness from clients as I do at the RPs. It sounds corny, but just your mere presence as happy individuals is enough.
Yeah. And yeah, again, just keep in mind, the vets are not out to get you. Like the vets are happy when you're happy. And we all just want to see horses be successful and happy and sound all week long. So my favorite is when people show their pride in their horse and they come to I always want to say the jog, but it's the walk, well turned out. This is not a requirement. Nobody needs to go buy a bonnet to go do the arrival exam walk, but it is a nice.
No, but when someone comes in an outfit with like a bolo and or a wild rag and they're dressed up and I'm like, okay, you nailed it. That is making my day. So no requirements, but also it always brings a smile to our face.
Yeah. All right, gang. Well, thanks very much for hanging out with us. If you are watching the recording of this after the fact and you have burning questions about the arrival exam or the finale jog, you can try to post them in the comments on this video. I will not promise I will see all of them just because of the amount of Facebook notifications I get in a day. If you have like a super burning question that you need to have answered, the place to get all of your questions answered is secretary@therrp.org. If Raina doesn't have an immediate answer for you, she will forward that to the person who will have the answer for you. So in the meantime, then take care of your horses, take care of yourselves, and we will see you in a couple of months. It is coming right along. I'm very excited.
Can't wait.
All right, everybody, have a good evening. Thanks very much.
See everyone.
Bye-bye.